Hello, this is the on-record portion of the Rockbridge Report. My name is Isidro Camacho, and today I'm joined by Dawone Robinson, the Virginia Policy Director at the Chesapeake Climate Action Network. Dawone, thank you for coming.
Yeah, no problem. Great to be here.
Yeah. So today Dawone spoke at the Virginia Environment Symposium at VMI. Can you kind of just give us a brief run-through of what your talk was about, especially focusing on the CPP? What is the CPP?
Yeah, so the CPP is the Clean Power Plan, and it is President Obama's attempt through the EPA to regulate carbon emissions from power plants. And so CO2 emissions, carbon pollution from power plants, is one of the main drivers of climate change, not only in America, but worldwide. And so what the Clean Power Plan is trying to do is to limit carbon pollution, lower it over time so that we can lower our emissions and help fight climate change.
Okay. And how does state governments function in this role? Because it is a federal plan.
Yeah, that's a good question. So yes, it is a federal plan, and what the president has done through EPA is very creative, and they've given states maximum flexibility, so they've called, to implement and design their own plans. And so Virginia has a certain reduction target that we have to hit. West Virginia has a different target. North Carolina has a different target, but each state has their own targets, and the EPA has given the states pretty much broad flexibility of how they hit their targets, so long as that they meet their final reduction targets. We have about a 30% carbon reduction emissions target that we have to hit by the year 2030. And we can do a couple of things. We can shift from coal to natural gas. We can invest in renewable energy, which I think is the best option that's on the table, increase solar and wind development in Virginia, and invest in energy efficiency measures, which reduces energy consumption, which reduces consumer bills, and it saves electricity, so we're not burning any more carbon into the atmosphere. So we have a plethora of options at our disposal in order to hit our targets, and I think that we can.
Okay. In terms of Virginia's targets, maybe compared to other states, maybe southern states, how do they compare throughout the nation? Are there some that need to focus more on reducing emissions, some that need to focus less?
Yeah, that was a complaint in the draft rules, that the final rules that are out are pretty consistent. I think that Virginia is in a good shape. So nationwide, as I said earlier, that all of our targets are different in different states. Virginia is right in the middle, and so we're pretty average of what we have to hit. There's not much that we need to do. As a matter of fact, the utilities, both of our main utilities in Virginia, Dominion Virginia Power and Appalachian Power Company, they have to submit 15-year plans to state regulators to show their power generation over the course of the next 15 years, taking what the utilities have already decided to do, absent the Clean Power Plan, before the Clean Power Plan was even implemented. What the utilities were already going to do, increasing more from coal to natural gas and developing in renewable resources, we're already about 80% or so of the way there to emissions reduction. We're only talking of about 15 to 20% more of what the utilities were already planning to do themselves. And so we have some good flexibility. Virginia's targets are very, very reasonable. The question is, how do we get to that last 15 or 20%? And I would argue that we should do it investing in renewable energy and energy efficiency in Virginia.
Something that struck me really today during your speech is you were talking about how people aren't really concerned in America with environmental protection in terms of reducing emissions. And you brought up the statistics, and I'd love for you to clarify if it's wrong, that Virginia, if it was viewed as a nation, would be the 39th nation in the world in terms of polluting emissions.
Yes.
And then I forget if you could clarify for me, if you took the southern states, where would they fall in the world?
Yeah, if you took the southeast states, so including Virginia, North and South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida, if those 6 collection of southeastern states were a nation, it would be the 5th highest emitter, behind only China, which is number 1, Russia, India, and Japan. And so we do have an enormous responsibility to reduce our pollution. And the point that I was making earlier at the conference is that, we hear this all the time, that climate change is such a big issue. It's an important issue, but it's a huge issue. We can't do anything about it. We're just Virginia. We can't do much about it. Yes, we can. Virginia independently We'd be the 39th biggest emitter if it were an independent nation. The southeastern region of those 6 states that I mentioned earlier, the 5th largest emitter. Like, we can make a difference. We are a heavily emitting nation, and we need to do more, and we can do more to cut our carbon emissions to fight climate change.
I think another point that you brought up that we should talk about right now is how people in Virginia feel like they aren't very much affected by the environment, but that's apparently not true. And there are some tangible kind of evidences of how environmental change is affecting Virginia. Can you comment about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that we see this a lot, and I think the most in-your-face example of climate change in Virginia is what's happening on Hampton Roads, maybe 200 miles from here. We are experiencing unprecedented levels of sea level rise in Hampton Roads that is rising much, much faster than anyone ever anticipated. Hampton Roads, Virginia is the 2nd most vulnerable area in the nation to sea level rise, second only to New Orleans. And the new projections project an increase of about 4 to 6, 7.5 feet upwards of sea level rise by the end of the century, and that would have devastating impacts on Hampton Roads, and we're already seeing it. Roads are already flooded, homes are already routinely flooded. Sea level rise is impacting the military readiness of the Navy. They are talking about it tremendously. Naval Station Norfolk is the largest naval base in the world. They have already raised their piers and spent hundreds of millions of dollars raising their piers and their docks because sea level rise has been creeping up, and it's been impacting the base. And so they are already in the adaptation phase, and it's going to be even worse over the course of the next decades and next century if we don't do anything about it. Even if we do something and shift to clean energy, there's going to be some level of sea level rise, but if we don't, then we're going to have much more damaging impacts on sea level rise on the coast of Virginia.
I mean, the emphasis is every there. So I guess the follow-up question to that would be, how can an average Virginian, either as a consumer or a businessman or just an everyday person, how can they kind of make steps toward reducing their own emissions?
Yeah, I think that certainly individual consumers can do what they can. They can purchase more efficient light bulbs. They can purchase more energy efficient appliances. I mean, those are things that individual consumers can do by themselves, but I think much more needs to be done. What we really need to do is to have everyone out there contact their representatives. We need policy change in Virginia. We need to contact our legislators, our state delegates, our senators, to push on the utilities to invest more in renewable energy. The state of Virginia has no mandatory renewable energy target. There is no law that is forcing the utilities to do anything and to invest in renewable energy like many other states, dozens of states across the United States do. They ensure that the state has to develop a certain amount of energy that is clean, that is renewable in order to fight climate change. Virginia doesn't have anything like that because the utilities continue to oppose it. And so I think what average citizens can do on top of their own personal lifestyle type usage is to contact their utilities and contact their representatives and say, we want significant policy change in Virginia. We want mandatory renewable portfolio laws. We want more laws that are incentivizing the growth of energy efficiency in Virginia so that we can conserve energy, and the energy that we do use comes from clean renewable sources.
Okay. Now I think we all have that much time left, so I kind of want to wrap it up with a question I've been thinking about.
Sure.
I was once a canvasser for the CPP, actually, and I did it in New York, and what I found was that a lot of people opposed this strictly because it was a big fundamental part of the Obama administration.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that, or how do people in your offices respond to that?
I would respond to that by being environmentally conscious. It's not a political matter. Being good stewards of the environment of our planet, it crosses political lines. It was a Republican president, Richard Nixon, that created the Environmental Protection Agency. Republican created the EPA to combat air pollution and to combat water pollution. A Republican president. You had Republican presidents, George H.W. Bush, that proposed a cap and trade program to cut back of sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere that leads to acid rain, or the acid rain program, which is a cap and trade program. Like these type of aggressive environmental programs, they were once no-brainers for both parties. And I think that unfortunately now, way too many issues, even outside of the environment, but every issue is so politicized, and it shouldn't be that way, especially the environment, because we all breathe the same air, we all drink the same water, and so we should have a comprehensive and robust discussion on these issues that crosses party lines.
Okay, that was a great way to end it. I really like to thank you for dropping by.
Of course, thanks for the invite. Happy to discuss. Thank you.
Great. Again, this is Dawone Robinson, the Virginia Policy Director of the Chesapeake Climate Action Program.